My family owned a breathtaking stretch of land, a crystal-clear lake wrapped in dense, untouched forest. For generations, we had been its only caretakers. At the center of everything stood a dam my great-grandfather built with his own hands, giving our family full control over the lake's water level. This wasn't just acreage on a map. It was heritage. It was memory. It was home. Years ago, we reached an agreement with the local Homeowners Association, the HOA. They wanted to develop property on the far side of the lake. We allowed it, but only under strict conditions. They were to preserve a wide buffer of trees along the shoreline and limit the number of homes constructed. The goal was simple: protect the natural beauty that made the lake special in the first place. They agreed. It seemed fair. We believed they respected what we were safeguarding. We were wrong. A few years back, I began noticing unusual activity across the water. Construction vehicles moved in and out constantly. The sound of saws and heavy machinery echoed from sunrise to sunset. The forest on their side was thick, so I couldn't clearly see what was happening. I reminded myself we had an agreement. I assumed this was just the beginning of the small-scale development we had approved. Then the rumors started. People in town began whispering about a large vacation resort, an aggressive tourism project planned right along the edge of our lake. My stomach tightened. That wasn't part of the deal. Not even close. I took my boat across the lake to see the truth with my own eyes. What I found made my chest go cold. The shoreline had been completely clear-cut. Where towering trees once stood, there was nothing but churned mud and jagged stumps. And stretching along the water's edge were rows of tightly packed, identical cabins, cheaply built and squeezed together with no regard for the landscape. I counted them. 109. 109 lifeless little boxes where there should have been a quiet slope of trees and wildlife. They hadn't just bent the agreement. They had obliterated it. When I confronted the HOA president, a slick man named Mr. Harrison, he barely reacted. He said the town needed tourism dollars. He claimed their legal team had identified a loophole in our contract. A loophole? That was his word for what looked like environmental vandalism. I was furious. But I also knew I couldn't outspend them in court. They had deeper pockets and political connections. Standing on my shoreline, staring at that hideous development, I felt crushed. They were going to profit from destroying my family's legacy, and no one would stop them. I attended town council meetings. I presented the original agreement. I showed photos of the devastation. Officials listened, nodded sympathetically, and did absolutely nothing. The tax revenue from 109 cabins was already dancing in their heads. I felt defeated. Then one evening, I stood beside the old dam. I stared at the massive control wheel, the same iron wheel my great-grandfather once turned, and something shifted in my mind. An idea formed. Bold, risky, brilliant. Our agreement gave me sole authority over the dam and the lake's water level. That detail had never changed. In their rush to build, they had focused entirely on the land. They forgot about the water beside it. The contract was crystal clear. The dam was mine. For weeks, I prepared carefully. I studied historic floodplain maps. I reviewed engineering assessments of the dam. I calculated how much I could safely raise the water level without harming my side of the lake or putting anyone in real danger. The cabins, however, had been built on a low-lying floodplain, made worse by the trees they had removed, trees that once absorbed excess rainfall. They had unknowingly built in a basin. The night I chose to act, a heavy storm rolled in. Rain poured steadily. Perfect cover. Any sudden rise in the lake could easily be attributed to the weather. Under darkness and rain, I walked to the dam. My pulse hammered in my ears, but my hands were steady. I gripped a large cast-iron wheel and began to turn it. It resisted at first, stiff from years of minimal use. I leaned into it with everything I had. Slowly, deliberately, I began closing the main spillway gate. The sound of the water shifted, from a roaring cascade to a deeper, pressurized rush through narrower outlets. I wasn't vandalizing anything. I wasn't breaking rules. I was exercising my legal rights. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a gray, misty dawn. I stepped onto my porch with a cup of coffee. The lake looked different, wider, fuller. Across the water, panic had erupted. The pristine lawns surrounding the new cabins were gone, replaced by swirling brown water. The lake now stretched farther inland, licking at cabin foundations. Residents scrambled to move furniture and belongings. What had been marketed as a lakeside paradise was quickly becoming lakeside reality. The resort had been built on land that was now effectively part of the lake bed. Mr. Harrison called, shouting accusations of sabotage and deliberate flooding. I calmly reminded him that I controlled the dam. After heavy rainfall, adjustments were necessary to maintain structural safety. Everything I had done was permitted under the agreement his lawyers had approved. He threatened lawsuits, financial ruin, public backlash. I told him to try. He knew the contract as well as I did. The water didn't drop. I maintained a higher level within safe engineering limits. Days passed, then weeks. The first row of cabins sat permanently in shallow water. Mold crept up interior walls. Foundations shifted in saturated soil. What was meant to be a grand resort opening turned into a soggy disaster. The media coverage was brutal. No one wanted a vacation in a swamp. The HOA's multi-million-dollar investment was sinking literally and financially. Eventually, the HOA filed for bankruptcy. The project collapsed entirely. The bank foreclosed on the property, and without buyers willing to take on a failing flood-prone resort, the land was ultimately transferred to a state conservation trust. The cabins were declared unsafe and demolished. It took years, but nature slowly reclaimed the shoreline. Grasses returned. Shrubs pushed through the soil. The scar faded. The lake settled into its new shape. Larger, wilder, more beautiful than before. On clear days, if you look carefully beneath the surface, you can still see fragments of concrete foundations. Quiet reminders of ambition built on arrogance. I never broke a single law. I simply understood the contract better than they did, and allowed nature to do what it has always done. My family's legacy remains intact. The lake is peaceful again. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe for